Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 73 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Again, it's great to do these review pods after tremendous Eagles victories. So I'm always going to be good when the Eagles play the way they did on Sunday.
Victory Tuesday podcasts are a lot more gratifying than Defeat Tuesday podcasts. And so far this year, we haven't had one of those. Hopefully, we'll keep that streak alive as long as possible. So
17 Victory Tuesdays. Let's sign it up. Yeah.
I'm down for that. Let's see what we can do. So
maybe 16. We'll rest. We'll maybe they'll have to rest the starters in week 18. Maybe we'll have to rest. We'll have to rest us. We'll bring in the
podcast. Bring in the backup podcasters.
Yeah. We'll have to bring in the backup podcasters. We'll bring in. I'm trying to think. We'll bring in. I'm trying to think Sixers people. We'll bring in Krell and I don't know who else. I lost my thought, but we'll bring in the Sixers people to do the rest of the podcasters week 18. Keep the voices ready for the playoffs.
Yeah, there we go. I like it. Although hopefully that would indicate a bye as well. So maybe we don't need the rest if we've got a bye, but
that's true.
We'll get into that later. So as we get down the stretch, but diving in, like Mark said, Victory Tuesday, the Eagles triumph over and take over FedEx Field. They triumph with a 24-8 win. This was a dominating performance from opening kickoff to the end of the game. Carson Wentz was sacked 9 times. He fumbled 2 times, which, by the way, those fumbles, I see different people considering those differently. Do you consider that a sack or not?
I think they should be.
Yeah. See, so like ESPN box scores showed 9 sacks and 2 fumbles. And I wondered I wondered if it doesn't show it as a strip sack because his arm just got hit. So he wasn't like taken to the ground. Like if you tackle him to the ground and he fumbles, I'm not sure. Another PFF had it as 11 sacks. So I wasn't sure. I'm not even sure what's official or if there is an official, but he was sacked 9 or 11 times, depending on how you want to count that. Fumbled twice, hit 17 times. At one point in the third, at the end of the third quarter, he had like 69 net passing yards. So just a dominating performance from the defense. The offense, I thought this would be a game where the running game really got going. The Commanders were giving up 7.5 yards a carry, albeit only through 2 games. I thought they were susceptible to the run, and the Eagles tried to run early, and they really struggled. First 2 drives didn't go anywhere, and they almost just bailed from that entirely, I thought, and went to the air, had a big day. Devonta Smith was electric. I'm shocked. You were higher on Devonta Smith than I was going into the draft. I thought he was a great player. I had some concerns about the stature. Would you have ever dreamed that he would be so good in like contested catch situations? Like I did not see that coming at all.
No, and it's funny. Even in this game, I watched with a couple friends, and they threw one up to Devonta earlier in the game, and he went and got it. And I was like, man. That's not what you'd think of him for. Like you'd think that ball or that type of ball would go to AJ, and you'd think you wouldn't be putting Devonta in the situations of go up and get it and 50-50 jump balls, and that's what he did all game on Sunday, and he had the bigger one later on in the game, obviously down near the goal line. Where I thought he broke his back for a second. I was concerned. It was like an instant, like, oh my God, what a catch! Oh, I'm extremely concerned for his well-being. But yeah,
then he comes out like 2 plays later and catches the touchdown too.
Yeah, exactly. He was, nothing short of unbelievable. That was obviously the Devonta Smith game that we'll remember as his breakout, absolute announcement that he's here. And I said before the season, and looking back on it, it was probably underrating AJ Brown just a little bit. I said that I wasn't as sure that there was a gap between our wide receiver 1 and our wide receiver 2 that others thought there was, because that's how talented I view Devonta Smith. For a little background, and people can make fun of me all they want. I had Devonta Smith ranked number 1 and his wide receivers among his draft class. And I had Jalen Waddle number 2 and Jamar Chase number 3. And I'm not saying that that's correct at all by any stretch of the imagination at this point. But I will just say that I think if he was in a different situation last year, I think we'd be talking about him much differently, and he'd be valued across the NFL the way he's being talked about right now, instead of how he was being talked about before this week. So he's still, in my opinion, I mean, you're not as, I'm not going to say you're not as high on him. I think you're very high on the player that he is right now, but he's a top 25 at worst receiver in football. I would probably make an argument for top 20. Is that fair?
I think so. I had him as wide receiver 3 in that draft. I had Waddle 1, Chase 2, Devonta 3, and I was concerned about Devonta's stature. Just, and so far he hasn't been injured. That could still crop up throughout his career. He's still an undersized guy, but in terms of getting off of press, he was a guy said his traits don't match what he's good at, because what he's good at is getting off of press. That was one of the things I was most impressed with him in college, was his release. Well, he's not a big guy. He's not the type of, so his traits and his skills didn't match. I didn't know how that would translate. It's translated well. One of the things that I really like from an X's and O's standpoint, if I can nerd out for a second, that the Eagles have done so far, they've started to go, and they did this a lot against Washington, they started to go empty. The running game wasn't working anyways, so you don't even need the threat of it. Go empty. And a lot of times they were putting Devonta Smith in the slot with Dallas Goedert out wide. And what that does is it forces the defense to either A, play zone coverage, which now you have Devonta Smith on a linebacker or a safety. That's a win. Or B, if they're going to play man, they have to tip that off pre-snap by putting a linebacker all the way out to the boundary on Goddard. And now you can dial up your man beater concepts. And I just love that they're doing that. They're trusting Hurts to make those reads and to get the ball out. And, Devonta Smith, 8 catches, 169 yards. That's a career high. So a great game for Devonta Smith. And, back in week 1, people were talking about, are they going to feed A.J. Brown too much? What's going to happen with Devonta Smith? Blah, blah, blah. Well, I said going into the season that teams are going to have to pick who they let beat them. The Lions put Jeffrey Okudah on Devonta Smith that whole game. And so A.J. Brown went off. That's the same guy, Jeffrey Okudah, who was a top 5 pick, who obviously had a bad rookie season, but he just shut down Justin Jefferson this week. Really good football player. And that's what having 2 guys like that allows you to do. It allows you to pick those matchups. Whoever you take away, you can feed the ball to the other guy. And as long as the chemistry stays there between those guys, which I don't think that's a concern anyways, but even if it was, winning cures all ills. The Eagles offense is just on fire. Now, they've scored 24 points in the first half 2 weeks in a row. Haven't scored a point in the second half in the last 2 weeks. Do you think that's something to be concerned about with the offense?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily something to be concerned about, but I think it's something that will crop up at some point and make a game closer than it should be, and maybe even cost them a game in terms of the way that they take their foot off the pedal a little bit in terms of their play calling. And even there was a 4th and 1, I believe, at the opposing 45 in this game in the second half. I think it was 24-2 at that point, maybe 24-0. And Sirianni punted it away. And I don't think he would ever even think about punting in that situation in the first half. And we've seen how aggressive he's been in close games. So, I think it's something that'll probably annoy us at some point going over a game this year that either made a game closer than it should be or cost us a game. But you mentioned how you have to pick your poison with Smith and Brown, but Goddard is the type of guy who can kill you as well. And we obviously we saw the deep ball with Quez a couple weeks ago. There's just so many options on this offense that are going to make Jalen Hurts look really good, even if he, and I'm not saying he hasn't progressed. I'm not saying he hasn't improved a lot, but there's an argument to be had that bringing A.J. Brown in alone and what that does for the people that were already in the offense and what that does for Jalen, that alone probably bumps Jalen from like the 14th or 15th best quarterback to the 10th or 11th best quarterback, just in terms of what he's got around him, because there's so much to work with. And then you mentioned the empty sets and how that's a really good look. And I think that that's something that they should employ a lot going forward, the best part about it, you said, the threat of we're not running the ball well anyway. It's not like we're giving up the threat of the run. We have Jalen Hurts. Like that's kind of the whole reason that I think these teams like Baltimore, like Arizona, like us, and it's cool that we get to be on that list. As a longtime believer, I'm a Madden player. I'm an NCAA football player from youth. You got to have a mobile quarterback to win. Not necessarily, but in Madden, it helps a lot. So it makes me happy that we get to mention the Eagles among those like teams with elite mobile quarterbacks in terms of the way that they're able to rush for first downs and to get out of hairy situations. And Jalen didn't even have to do that a ton in this game, which I think is a plus. I think that's a positive. But having that in the back pocket is what makes that empty look so dangerous for the Eagles, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And you flip it over to the defensive side of the ball, and it was just a dismantling of the Washington offense. And I've heard people talking about, who have the Eagles played, pump the brakes on the hype train. And you could say that perhaps from the offensive standpoint. The Lions, not a good defense. The Vikings, not a very good defense. The Commanders, not a good defense. But the defense has been astounding. They shut down Justin Jefferson coming off of that week 1 game that he had. And then they turn around and they go to FedEx Field and they play the Commanders, and Carson Wentz is second in the league in passing yardage going into that game. And they steamrolled them. Just incredible performance. Brandon Graham with 2.5 sacks. He looked phenomenal. Jordan Davis got involved. He had 4 pressures, like a 35% pass rush win rate on 14 pass rushing snaps. Josh Sweat, a sack and a half. Hassan Reddick, a sack and a half. Josh Sweat, and he's incredible. Like there was one of those where he ran around the horn on the left tackle, and I was like, oh, he kind of got a half a step, but the left tackle pushed him far enough back. But he just like contorts it was insane, that sack. I'll put out a clip of it later, but
I'm a big Josh Sweat guy, so I'm right there with you.
Yeah, the TJ Edwards playing so well. Like, would you have believed me if I told you in April that the Eagles would draft Nakobe Dean? A, just that they would draft a linebacker. They draft Nakobe Dean, and then B, that through 3 weeks he would have 3 snaps because TJ Edwards is playing so well, because Kazir White is playing well. It's just everything seems to be coming together for the defense and the offense. And as long as pieces stay healthy, the Eagles really look like they're going to run away with the NFC East.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get to how I think about them in terms of an NFC landscape, not just an NFC East landscape. And I'm having dangerous thoughts. Like I am thinking dangerous things about this team. And I think a lot of it has to do with the roster. A lot of it has to do with what I've seen in the first 3 weeks. But a lot of it has to do in looking across the NFC. And we're going to do that when we go through our games here, going through the week 3 review that we always do outside of the Eagles. But I mean, just doing a quick overview, the Packers seriously lack explosiveness. They seriously lack a go-to guy on the offensive end to make things easier than they need to be for Aaron Rodgers. The Minnesota Vikings, we saw what their problems are. Their defense isn't very good. And when Kirk Cousins is your quarterback, it's hard to take you seriously. We've seen all of the other teams in the NFC South, besides one that I'll wait to name in a minute, have crumpled upon themselves. They're all irrelevant, in my opinion. The rest of the NFC East, even though 2 of the teams are 2-1, I don't think any of them are serious contenders. The Rams have serious problems. Matthew Stafford does not look like himself. San Francisco, it's the same story, broken record every year. They have the worst injury luck in the league. Trent Williams now goes down. Trey Lance goes down to take away any upside that they had long term. And the 2 teams that are left standing, in my opinion, are the best team in the NFC right now, which is the Philadelphia Eagles. And then the team that I think will probably be the best team in the NFC when Mike Evans returns this week and when Chris Godwin comes back from injury and maybe when Gronk comes out of retirement in a month, who knows? I think that team will be the Tampa Bay Bucks. I think the Bucks and the Eagles will be the 2 teams that are the class of the NFC. And I think the Bucks defense and the Eagles overall well-roundedness are the 2 most impressive things so far in the NFC. And I think right now, if you made me stick my flag anywhere, I'd be saying we're going to see Bills Chiefs and Eagles Bucks in the 2 championship games.
Yeah, this graphic, just the NFL team tiers, the offensive EPA per play and defensive EPA per play. And there's just nobody even close to being, as good on both sides of the ball combined as the Eagles through 3 weeks. And so it's a small sample size, but it's hard not to be excited about what you've seen on the field so far. Now, let me ask you this, and actually, hold on, let me say something. Let me complete one other thought first. One thing the Eagles have to fix is special teams, because special teams will cost them a game this year. You go to the Vikings game and you have the blocked field goal that if Aaron Siposs, a punter, you're relying on a punter to get up off his knees and run down a guy, that could have changed the second half. That could have cost them a game. They almost had 2 punts blocked in that game. You go into this week and you've got Britton Covey dropping a punt. They tried a Devonta Smith out there to return some punts, which I don't want to see. The Eagles have got to figure something out with special teams. Special teams has been horrendous, and not Jake Elliott, whatever, but their kick return game is atrocious. Teams are popping the ball up to the 5-yard line because it's free yardage. They're all their special teams units. It's just been atrocious, and they've got to get that fixed before it costs them a game.
Yeah, it's definitely been a problem so far. I'm hoping that's, it is such a small sample size that I'm hoping that, that'll fix itself and, regress positively to the mean there. But yeah, if it's a coaching issue and if it's a preparation issue, then they're going to need to figure that out. And I hope, while there isn't a mountain of things to fix, I hope that they can focus on that a little bit this week while they don't have a ton of injuries, while they haven't seen a ton of problems that they have to spend a ton of time on in film and practice to fix. That's not a tiny thing, but a small section of the game that doesn't have a lot of plays devoted to it each game that I think they can spend time on and fix in practice.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, and then we'll move on. And this isn't previewing the next game, but I just want your answer here. Are the Jags the toughest team that the Eagles will face for the rest of the season?
No, I'll still say Green Bay. I'll still say Green Bay because I think Green Bay's defense is really good, and they still have Aaron Rodgers, and they have a really good running game, and I think LaFleur is a really good coach. They just, I hate to harp on one situation, but they really, really lack a go-to guy, an explosive guy, anyone that can make a play happen once the ball's in their hands whatsoever. Allen Lazard, he's stepped up in some ways, but he's not the type of guy that's going to go and get you yards and go and make you a big play. So I still think Green Bay's better than Jacksonville at this point. But yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about Jacksonville in a little bit. I don't know what to make of it yet.
I agree with you, especially since the Packers game is at the end of November. If you told me like Packers week 4, Jags in November, I would say the Jags is the toughest game. But I think the Packers will figure it out. But this is a big test for the Eagles, and I think it's the toughest game they have until, like I said, the end of November when they play Green Bay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I guess when are we playing Dallas on the road?
I'll look that up. While you start to talk about the Steelers at the Browns on Thursday Night Football, the Steelers lose that game 17-29. What were your thoughts on that game?
My number one thought is you drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round. It's absolutely ridiculous that Mitchell Trubisky's still out there. But, this game was on Thursday. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. People have, I don't think people even care anymore about this game because it feels like it was forever ago. But what I will say is, because I'm a gambling guy, that play at the end, they should outlaw those types of things. Those points shouldn't count. It's so unfair to us gamblers, and of course, the Browns are involved, and I don't know if you'll remember this. I believe it was the Lamar Jackson running back to the locker room to poop game. The Browns at the end of the game had a very similar lateral type play. I actually had a long winning streak of calling into the Barstool gambling show that I call into, that I went up to, eventually ended because the Cleveland Browns had that lateral play and ended up giving up, I believe it was either a safety or a touchdown to the Ravens that caused the Ravens to cover instead of the Browns to cover. And watching that on Thursday night gave me PTSD.
Yeah. So the Eagles travel to Dallas on Christmas Eve. I don't know how I forgot that, but yeah.
Well, I will. I mean, we'll talk about Dallas. We'll get to that game. I have some thoughts.
All right. So Amari Cooper with his second straight 100-yard game in this one. Remind me, what did Dallas get for Amari Cooper again?
I actually kind of hate this narrative. I hate this narrative because they had to pay him $20 million. That's what they were trading to do.
And why couldn't they afford to pay him 20? What are they paying Zeke this year?
No, it's actually, that's not even really what people should be focusing on. What people should be focusing on is that Dallas has cap room right now. Mm-hmm. Dallas has like, I think it's like 12 million in cap room or something crazy like that. Like they have the most in the NFL of available cap room, and people have been like waiting for them to do something. At least they were in the weeks leading up to the year, into the point where I think they were even mentioned for Bradbury before the Eagles had signed him late. Like they were in the conversation for that. So it's a bizarre move that they're not spending money. I don't know what that's about. If they're planning on giving out a big extension or something, like I don't know what that's about. But I will just say Cleveland did not get some steal for Amari Cooper. They're paying him $20 million. So when people do the whole, the Vikings gave up this for Jalen Reagor, and it's like, yeah, little Jalen Reagor makes like $18 million less. Or Jalen Reagor probably makes a little bit more than I just gave him credit for right there. But
he's a first round pick.
Yeah, he probably makes like $4 or $5 million. But
so I got a trivia question for you. So Amari Cooper, back-to-back 100-yard games. He's the first player to do that for Cleveland since who? Do you have a guess?
It's got to be Josh Gordon, right?
Yep, Josh Gordon in 2013. So, which talk about a career that went off the rails. But I'm with you on the Pickett thing. Like Trubisky started out 8 of 9 passing, rushing TD. They had the lead, but when you refuse to throw downfield or over the middle, teams will adjust, and the Browns did. And Trubisky's just not it. But I do have a question for you. Who is the bigger issue for Pittsburgh? Is it Mitch Trubisky or is it Matt Canada, the offensive coordinator?
I think it's Mitch Trubisky. People kill Matt Canada, but I guess I can't get a full read on what he is as a play caller until he doesn't have the corpse of Ben Roethlisberger or Mitchell Trubisky. Like, if I see Kenny Pickett come in and I'm impressed by some of the things I'm able to see from him at an NFL level, and then the play calling is still so questionable, then maybe I'll start calling Matt Canada, calling for his job. And I'm not defending him. I'm not saying he's doing a good job, and I'm not saying that I think he's a good coach, but I do think some of I always kind of defend the offensive coordinators that get blamed for bad quarterback play, because I think that that's something that happens. It's not a Matt Canada issue. That's like that happens in college football. It happens in the NFL. And I don't necessarily know if that's fair, because once the ball is snapped, the quarterback has to read the field. And I know that obviously you call plays, and obviously there's hot routes. Obviously things are designed, but at a certain point, it's on the quarterback to make the play.
Yeah, I would say Canada's the bigger issue, but I think they're both an issue. But you really can't know unless you change a variable. And unfortunately for Steelers fans, Mike Tomlin said after the game he's not considering a change in quarterback or play caller. So, and we'll move on here. But Cleveland is now 2-1. Injuries are mounting, though. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah left the game. Taven Bryan left the game. Jadeveon Clowney was already out. And then, of course, Myles Garrett was in the car crash after the game. That hopefully he's okay and not missing a lot of time. So injuries are mounting in Cleveland.
I will just say, and not that I don't want to say much more about this game, but I think we as a country need to start rooting more against the Browns. I know Deshaun Watson's not out there, but folks, we do not want to be in a situation where the Browns are like 7-5 in week 12 when Deshaun Watson comes back, and then they have to play these big games, and this starts dominating the conversation again. And then the Browns are going to the playoffs, and we have to watch the Browns in the playoffs with Deshaun Watson. Like, I wanted the Browns so badly to not be good and to not be relevant, so we didn't have to even worry about it, and it almost became like an ugly, disgusting footnote each week. But it's not the case.
Yeah,
I think
hopefully we'll get
decent.
there.
I think they're decent.
Moving on to two teams that are not decent. New Orleans traveling to Carolina. They lost 14-22. When you lose to Carolina, I don't want to talk about you anymore. I got blown up all offseason by Saints fans talking about how great the Saints were going to be. Well, they're not. The Saints fumbled 3 times. They threw 2 interceptions. Jameis is awful. He looked awful. Alvin Kamara only averaged 4 yards per carry. Now, Baker Mayfield also looked awful. Neither of these teams is going anywhere. My biggest takeaway from this game is that it really is a shame that Matt Corral got hurt, because I think he would be starting very, very soon if he were healthy. Unfortunately, it's going to burn a year for him because Baker Mayfield's going to keep trotting out there. I don't think either of these teams is really going to go anywhere. On the season, Jameis Winston, when attempting passes of 10 plus air yards, has 0 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. He's just not it. And everybody except Saints fans knew that going into the year.
I don't even know if that's true, though, Shane. There was a good amount of national people that loved the Saints going into this year, and people that were picking the Saints as their dark horse pick, and people giving Jameis the credit. There's a weird Jameis society. And you know what the funny thing is? I'm not generally – I don't think I'm lower than consensus on Jameis. Like, I think I'm at consensus. But I know what he is. Like, I know his strengths. I know his weaknesses. I know his limitations. And when you take him away from Sean Payton, that's going to be a problem. Like, when you have, and especially coming off the ACL, and especially with the back injury he has. And oh yeah, by the way, he's got to go on a plane over to London now this week with 4 broken bones in his back. Bet the Vikings -2.5. That's all I'll say about the Saints next week. But this was a kitchen sink game for the Panthers, in my opinion. Like, this was a game where the defense showed up and showed out, and they were not going to let them lose this game. So I don't think this game made me feel better about the Panthers. It just made me feel worse about the Saints.
Yeah, which makes me feel better. So
and I was right there with you. The Saints fans were coming after me. One of my biggest plays of the offseason was Saints under, I think the number is 8.5. I don't quite remember. I think it was 8.5. I'd have to take a look at my article that I wrote, but the Saints under is one of my biggest plays of the year. So I very much am rooting on their downfall.
Yeah. All right. Moving on, we have Houston traveling to Chicago. They lose 20 to 23. We won't talk about this one long. Roquan Smith, who's in a contract dispute with Chicago, who is injured, plays one of the best games of his career, 16 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and the interception to seal the game. My biggest takeaway from this game is that the Bears are cowards. They ran the ball on 3rd and 6, 3rd and 10, and 3rd and 17 in the first half. They killed clock before the half instead of getting aggressive. It could not be more clear that they do not trust Justin Fields at all. They will have a new quarterback next season. I think there's no chance Justin Fields is their starting quarterback next year. A little bit of draft shout out here. Jalen Petrie, a safety who you and I both loved in the draft, picked Fields twice.
I didn't love him.
Oh, I thought you were.
But I watched this game. He played fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. I was pretty high on him. I thought maybe Dibes was the one that was up higher on him.
Yeah, it was. He was.
So he picked Fields twice. Derek Stingley, who was my CB1, did not allow a completion, which is easy to do when they only throw 12 passes. But he also had a TD saving tackle. So Houston, I think they're going to stay competitive. They're just not a good team. They're coached well. They play hard. They're going to be competitive in games. Chicago, I think they just hurt their chances to get the quarterback they want with every game they win.
I've bet on the Texans every week, so I've watched so much Texans. I've watched every Texans snap from this football season. This was the game that I'll say made me finally be like, Davis Mills might not be the guy. This was a rough game for Mills Mafia. I really thought he made some terrible decisions. He threw, I don't have the stat sheet right in front of me. He either threw 2 or 3 picks. I think it was 3 if I'm not mistaken, but he had a couple balls that could have been picked that weren't. So this was a game that I walked out of feeling much, much worse about both quarterbacks. And switching over to the Bears, I don't want to kill Justin Fields because I really don't think any of it's his fault. I think, and we've talked about this at length, that I think this is the worst situation in the league for any quarterback, especially a young quarterback. What they did this offseason was malpractice in terms of building a quarterback and putting things around your quarterback to make him grow. But I will just say, I'd like to see more from Fields, even in the worst of situations. And maybe this is me. It's kind of a Trevor Lawrence situation from last year where I loved Trevor Lawrence so much as a prospect that even in the worst of situations, I came out disappointed that he wasn't able to make things happen just off of pure talent. And maybe that's just not how it works at all in the NFL. But I expect more than 23 completed passes from Justin Fields. And I know they're not letting him throw it a lot. And I know their receivers are terrible. But at a certain point, he's got to go and make it happen on his own. And I'm getting a little concerned that it's not just the situation around him.
Yeah, that's well said. I don't disagree with any of that. So let's go on to a game that was shocking, eliminated a lot of people in survivor pools, cost me big bets. That is Kansas City traveling to Indianapolis and not only not covering what was a 4.5 point spread, they lose the game outright, 17-20. Jelani Woods, the guy we were both high on, had 2 touchdowns in this game, including the game winner with less than a minute left. Kansas City, everything that could go wrong for Kansas City in this game did. Sky Moore muffed a punt. They missed an extra point. They missed a field goal. They had a poorly executed fake field goal. Like, this was just one of those games where everything that could go wrong did for the Chiefs, and they lose on the road. Matt Ryan fumbled twice. He's fumbled 7 times through 3 games. The Colts O-line is not good. And Ryan invites pressure, and he's got bad ball security. He's on pace for it to shatter his career high in fumbles. But Indianapolis escapes with a win to stay relevant in an AFC South that's not very good.
Yeah, I mean, if the Chiefs have Harrison Butker, they win this game by double digits.
Mm-hmm.
That's it's really that simple. But everything, like you said, everything that could go wrong did. I had my biggest play of the week on the Chiefs -4.5. I also had the Chiefs and the Bengals parlayed together in a money line parlay. So even when I realized they weren't going to cover, the fact that they lost that game, Chris Jones, did you? I just zoned out because you were reading off all the things that went wrong in this game, and I was seeing red. Did you mention Chris Jones? Did you mention?
I didn't, but yeah, the unsportsmanlike conduct.
He looked at Matt Ryan and said something, and the refs were like, Matt Ryan's a grandfather. The man's a statue. You can't say something mean to him after you hit him. That's a flag. That's mean. I cannot believe that they got a sack on. I think it made it like 4th and 18 or something like that, or 4th and 15, whatever it was. And they just, whatever. Unsportsmanlike conduct, first down, keep it moving. Red Zone later on in the day, in the 4 o'clock slate, Red Zone did their, Gillette drive of the day or whatever sponsor it was. And they showed that drive and didn't mention the fact that it was aided by an unsportsmanlike conduct to get them down the field. They're just like, oh, what an 85-yard drive. It's like, well, 15 of those yards were, Matt Ryan being looked at wrong and the ref feeling some type of way about that. That is an unbelievable call. And then even after all of that, the missed field goal, the terrible fake field goal, running it up the gut on 4th and 1 when your quarterback is Patrick freaking Mahomes, and then Mahomes walks off the field and for the first time of his career shows some anger and wants to fight Eric Bieniemy basically. After all of that, no sportsmanlike conduct, gets Indy all the way down the field. They score the touchdown. They go up. Mahomes is driving down the field. Mahomes is taking them down the field, and a tipped pick to end the game. And it's just like, I could not believe that the Chiefs lost this game. They outplayed the Colts in every single facet. That, by the way, we talked about the Eagles needing to figure out special teams. The Chiefs need to figure out special teams. And
at least their kicker got hurt. That's a lot of their woes, but yeah.
They need to take Sky Moore off punt returns, because even after he fumbled the punt return, he did another one where he fielded it on the 3-yard line, and he got to the 8. Sky Moore is not a punt returner. Maybe he was at Central Michigan, but he
wasn't. He has no experience punt returning in college. It's something they're trying to get him accustomed to, and it's not going well.
That's an insane decision by Andy Reid, and he made some insane decisions, such as, I can't believe I have so many things to say about this because I'm searching through my brain and I know I'm going to forget something, but Andy Reid had 3 timeouts and let the Colts score with 30 seconds left. You have 3 timeouts, dude. Just call one with a minute. They're at the 5-yard line. They're probably going to score. Maybe you should leave Patrick Mahomes a little bit of time. Maybe that's a good idea. Andy Reid has still not opened up Madden 03 through 22 to realize how to run a clock. And I'm not an Andy Reid guy, and I don't want to do a whole dissertation on this. I think when he's mentioned among the names such as like Bill Belichick and Sean Payton, I want to vomit a little bit. And I also think I can't believe I'm venting, folks. I'm sorry. I won't have this much to say about the other games, I promise. But I will just say, I think Andy Reid gets an insane amount of credit for Patrick Mahomes being Patrick Mahomes. I'm quite confident that Patrick Mahomes would have figured out how to be an all-time great pretty much wherever he went. And I'm not saying Andy Reid doesn't do a good job.
Unless it was Chicago.
Yeah, unless it was Chicago. I'm not saying Andy Reid doesn't do a good job, but a lot of the time I'll hear him mentioned as like, Mahomes was so raw, and Andy Reid coached him up and turned him into this. And it's like, all right. I watched him at Texas Tech. He was pretty damn special. Like I've just always cringed anytime I've heard that line of thinking. And watching this game, it felt like Andy Reid was like, hey, Patrick, you want to play with a terrible play calling strategy and see if we can win anyway? Let's try it. It'll be fun. Like, it was like turning the video game on to like all Madden, like when you don't have to. I don't know.
That's what Bill Belichick's been doing for 3 years. So maybe Andy Reid thought he would try it.
Yeah, Bill Belichick's like, I'm gonna force myself to have a worse team than everybody. I'm gonna hire idiots around me, and and let's just try to win and prove to myself that I'm great. This Chiefs game, I never want to think about it again. I just vented all that out there. I will just say, Jelani Woods, he's a stud. We were right. But I never want to think about this game again, and I never will. I wish I could get the Men in Black, like the mind eraser of this game, because man, oh man, was it a painful watch.
Yeah. All right, well, let's roll on from special teams miscues to special teams miscues. Buffalo going to Miami. They dropped the game 19-21. The butt punt, right? You get the butt punt. It put Buffalo a field goal from winning. But the Miami defense stood tall, and they pull out a win. The Dolphins brought a lot of pressure at Josh Allen in this game. They sacked him 4 times. They pressured him on 30% of his dropbacks. And like the Chiefs, this is a game where a lot just went wrong for the Bills. Josh Allen skipped a pass for a go-ahead touchdown from a clean pocket, might I say. That set up the safety that led to the butt punt. But if you score a touchdown there, you've got the lead. Allen had a fumble inside his own 10. He messed up a spike attempt at the end of the second quarter. Their kicker missed a 38-yard field goal. Matt Milano drops a pick 6. Gabe Davis dropped a touchdown. Like, lots of miscues for the Bills. And they didn't have that much cushion. They lost both of their safeties. Micah Hyde's out for the year now. And Tua was able to do just enough. And I do mean just enough. Buffalo has 497 yards of offense to Miami's 212. They had 31 first downs to Miami's 15. They had 40 minutes of time of possession to Miami's 19. They just couldn't put points on the board and come away with the W. So the Bills actually in this game, they had the highest time of possession in a regulation loss since 2014. So another team that I think is really good that just had a lot of things go wrong in this game. What did you take away from this one?
My takeaway from this one, and obviously the Bills probably should have won this game, and the Bills probably played better even though they lost. My takeaway is that the Bills are not, undefeatable. The Bills are not this rolling ball of chainsaws that people have made them out to be. You can play a good game and beat the Bills. It's not like, and by the way, we could say all that stuff about how much of an anomaly it was that the Bills lost, and everyone is doing the same exact thing, giving the Bills all the excuses in the world. And things went wrong. I didn't think the Dolphins played their best game. Like, I didn't think the Dolphins played their perfect version of their offense, and Tua missed a little bit of time there before coming back with the quote-unquote back injury instead of the head injury. But, I mean, I'm just happy a little bit. I can't believe this. Like, I love Josh Allen. He's one of my favorite players in the world to watch, and I've been a long-time Josh Allen guy. I've found myself a little bit annoyed, and I've noticed this since last year, at just how all in the entire NFL media and the entire football Twitter and how much everyone is in the pocket of the Bills. Like, I feel like everyone's rooting for the Bills. Like, everyone wants the Bills to just be the Super Bowl favorite contender and win the Super Bowl, and everyone wants those fans, and they're crazy fans. And I just, they're really good. Like, they're a really good team. I find myself a little bit annoyed that this never happened for Mahomes and the Chiefs. This isn't happening for the Eagles. Like, this isn't happening, for Justin Herbert's a little different. They haven't made the playoffs or done anything yet, but I just don't understand why I'm supposed to just love the Bills. And this is a weird little rant that I wanted to go on. I do just think people have crowned them a bit too early. And I think what this game showed is you can play a good game and you can beat them. I have a couple stats to throw out here. Quick little trivia for you. There are 3 teams who are 3-0 against the spread so far this year. Who are those 3 teams?
Oh gosh, I have no idea. Not any teams I've bet on, that's for sure.
The Dolphins are 1.
Dolphins, yeah,
and they've covered those spreads by 8 points per game, which is a pretty remarkable stat. The Falcons are 3-0 against the spread, covering by a little over 5, and the Lions are 3rd. That's a good guess. The Lions are 3rd. The Texans are 2-0-1, so they haven't lost a bet, but they didn't cover this week. They pushed.
I was just trying to think of teams that were bad, that were thought to be bad, that have scored a bunch.
Oh, yeah. The Lions, they've been darling since last year against the spread. And then one more stat. The most receiving yards so far this season, the top 3, Tyreek Hill is number 1. Stephon Diggs is number 2. And Jalen Waddle is number 3. That was going into this game. It was the first game played where all 3 NFL receiving leaders all played in the same game since November 16th, 1980.
Wow.
And also, for all the Tua haters out there, going into this game, Tua was supporting 2 of the top 3 receiving yards leaders in the NFL. So, cry me a river.
All right, let's roll on to the Lions. Detroit goes to Minnesota. They lose a heartbreaker, 24-28. Kirk Cousins looked bad in this game, but he was able to make a play when it counted after the Lions missed a long field goal, which was a really questionable decision we'll get into. Cousins found KJ Osborne for a 28-yard touchdown to win the game. The Lions in this game went for it on 6 fourth downs. They converted 4 of them. But with 4th and 4, up 3, with 1:14 left, they attempted the ill-fated field goal from the 54-yard line after missing a 48-yarder earlier. Now, analytics gave a strong go for it on that decision. They show a 5.4% win probability increase going for it over the field goal. My thing just is a field goal does nothing for you. You still lose the game on a touchdown. So if you're uncomfortable going for it, which I think you should on 4th and 4, just punt it away. Like, make them drive 80-plus yards with 1:10 left in the game. I thought that was a really bad decision no matter which way you slice it. And it didn't make sense from Dan Campbell, who I think has been really aggressive throughout the season. But Justin Jefferson had another rough day in the office with 14 yards on 3 catches. Jeffrey Okudah shut him down just like he did Devonta Smith week 1. He's back, folks. He's a good football player that was not ruined by Matt Patricia. He was bad as a rookie because Matt Patricia stinks. And now he's got a decent coach and he's showing out, what he is. And then Dalvin Cook had a shoulder injury that caused him to leave the game. And so that'll be something worth monitoring for the Vikings, how long he is going to be out.
From what I saw, I think he might be good to go this week. From what I was looking at, it seemed like
I hadn't seen an update yet on that.
It seemed like maybe I missed something as well, but it seemed like he was going to be good to go. And by the way, going back to the kick there on Dan Campbell, Dan Campbell came out and admitted that he messed it up. So I've killed Dan Campbell a lot in the past. I'm not a Dan Campbell guy. I think he's a little bit of a buffoon, but he came out and admitted that he messed up the call. He regrets it, and he would do it differently this time if he ever was in that situation again. And that's what we want to hear from head coaches. We want to hear them admit when they messed up and admit when they made mistakes instead of just, defending the situation. Or like Nathaniel Hackett did after week 1. He kind of said he messed up, but then he was like, but I might consider it if I was in that situation again. And, it all depends game to game on the situation. And it's like, no, dude, just say you messed up. Like, I think people would respect that more. And I think people do respect it that Dan Campbell came out and said he messed it up. But just from a football perspective, I've said this about a couple games now. I walked out of this game feeling worse about both these teams. Minnesota's offense, it's just 2 weeks in a row of Kirk Cousins reminding you, like, hey, you shouldn't have been high on me all off season because, or like this, I'm still Kirk Cousins. And that's what he was in this game. He's, still as average as they come and can be very much below average when it's not a good Kirk Cousins game. So the fact that Justin Jefferson had 14 yards is malpractice, whether that be against Kevin O'Connell or whether that be against Kirk Cousins. You have to get the ball to Justin Jefferson, no matter what. And they failed to do so. It somehow didn't cost them the game. But I expect them to do whatever it takes to get the ball in Justin Jefferson's hands in London. And I think he's got a big game in him coming in London.
All right. One trivia question for you from this game before we move on. Lions receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown had a 30-yard reception and a 30-yard carry in this game. Only one other receiver in the NFL has done that this year. Do you know who it is?
Is it Debo?
No. It's his brother, Bears wide receiver Equanimeous St. Brown. So they're keeping that in the family. The only two guys in the league with a 30-yard reception and a carry. I thought that was kind of funny. So
that's great. Their dad was
who I would have guessed. Yeah.
Their dad was a huge star on Hard Knocks. He was one of the stars of Hard Knocks. So funny to see that.
Yeah. All right, rolling on. Baltimore at New England. Baltimore wins 37-26. Do you think Baltimore regrets lowballing Lamar Jackson yet? 18-29 for 218 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also rushed for 100 yards and 1 touchdown. Lamar Jackson has more touchdowns. Let me rephrase this. No team in the NFL, no team has scored more touchdowns than Lamar Jackson has scored this year. And he's doing it with almost no supporting cast on offense. Just incredible stuff from Lamar Jackson, who is going to get paid this offseason one way or another.
I've heard Jalen Hurts MVP buzz. I've heard Josh Allen MVP buzz. I've even heard Tua Tagovailoa MVP buzz and odds jumping all over the place and these gambling sites tweeting out the odds. Lamar Jackson is the MVP with no questions asked, with a bullet right now. And I think he's got a commanding lead on that conversation. We're only 3 weeks in, not even like 1/6 of the way through here, but
they were down to their 4th string left tackle in this game.
The Ravens are not good. The Ravens aren't good. I mean, the Patriots did not play well in this game, and they were leading for a while. They were in this game. The reason they lost a couple of bad interceptions from Mack at the end, and he was hurt at the end as well. And that actually made this game look a little bit more lopsided than it was. This game was close the entire way. And this Ravens defense has serious problems. This Ravens defense is bad. And this Ravens, we've ad nauseum talked about the receiving options that they've given Lamar over his time there. And he's making the most of every single one of them like he has. He turned Hollywood Brown into a 1,000-yard, 100-catch type receiver. He's turning Devin Duvernay from a nobody into a thing. He's turning Rashad Bateman from a promising first-round pick into a number 1 receiver. And Mark Andrews is competing with Travis Kelce to be the best tight end in the sport right now because of the numbers that Lamar Jackson's putting up with him. I don't want to hear about Lamar Jackson's, inefficiencies passing the football. I don't want to hear about his inaccuracy, and I don't want to hear about how once he gets to the playoffs, he can't throw the ball. Watch the dude play and tell me he can't throw the ball. He's the best quarterback in football right now. And I'll take Patrick Mahomes. I'll take Josh Allen over him just in terms of whatever. They're better players. That's fine. Lamar Jackson's the most valuable player to their team right now because I think the Ravens stink. I don't think the Ravens are good this year. I think they have Lamar Jackson.
It's almost like you talked about their defense. It's almost like they shouldn't have gotten rid of Wink Martindale. Just saying.
Yeah, I totally agree. He's a great D coordinator.
Yeah, and I hate that he ended up in New York. But you mentioned the Mac Jones ankle injury. It's a high ankle sprain, so he's expected to miss some time, and that'll probably be a lingering thing for them throughout the season.
Is it? We have to cancel a team.
We do. I'm prepared to cancel the Patriots.
Let's table it. Let's put it to the side.
We'll come back to it at the end. I know a person I want to cancel, but we're not there yet.
Okay, let's get there.
All right, so Cincinnati at the Jets. Cincinnati wins 27-12. Trey Hendrickson had a great game, 2.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles as the Bengals defense finally came to life. Logan Wilson and Jesse Bates each walk away with an interception. Joe Burrow started fast. He had 163 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. Most importantly, though, he only took 2 sacks all day, which, to be honest, that to him, that probably feels like a week-long vacation, on the beach somewhere. My biggest takeaway from this game, honestly, because this is lopsided talent, but Sauce Gardner is legit. We knew that in the draft. We talked about it. He pretty well locked up Jamar Chase when he was the one on him. He ended the day with 2 passes defense, 4 tackles, a tackle for loss, and, of course, the Snow Angel celebration after he broke up that go route to Jamar Chase. But my favorite thing from Sauce was Jamar Chase, obviously, he's getting frustrated, and he started jawing at him and, stuck his hand in his face or whatever. And I just loved Sauce's reaction. He just kind of swiped his hand away and walked off. Most cool, collected. Usually you would expect a cornerback to bow up to that. He just doesn't even care. Just swipe the hand away and go back to the line. So Sauce Gardner's legit. The Eagles. I wish it was the Eagles. The Jets found a franchise corner.
Yeah, Sauce is all ball, man. That guy doesn't. He's not messing around with any, getting in any fights or anything. He's the man. I love watching Sauce play, and he was definitely the only positive takeaway here, really, for the Jets. They did use Breece Hall in a way that I didn't necessarily know Breece Hall could be used. I think he got 10 targets. I think he had 6 catches in this game. So, positive for the future is that maybe Breece Hall is more of a dual threat running back than I had given him credit for previously. But the positive takeaway here is for Sauce. As for the Bengals, they did what they're supposed to do. I mean, they came out and they handled business against the Jets. I don't know if I'm walking away from this saying all the Bengals' problems are fixed and they're back on track and, here playoffs, here we come. But I will say they quelled some concerns that they might be going down a dark and winding path. It's a good sign that they were at least able to handle business against the teams that they should. We're going to learn about the Bengals this Thursday.
Yeah. All right. So rolling on to our last game in the 1 p.m. slate, the Raiders traveled to Tennessee in a loser leaves town game, battle of 0-2 teams, and the Raiders lost. And now they have to leave town and go back to Las Vegas. I don't think being the final team without a win is what the Raiders had in mind when they hired Josh McDaniels, which, LOL. And then they traded for Davante Adams. Now, Tennessee was up 24-10 at halftime. They fell apart in the second half. Tannehill threw a pick. He fumbled. They couldn't move the ball. The Raiders come back, but the Titans defense holds on a 2-point conversion that would have tied the game. So, the Raiders have Hunter Renfrow, Davante Adams, and Darren Waller, but it was Mac Hollins who showed up in this game. 158 receiving yards. Mark, Mac Hollins already has a career high for a season on receiving yards this year in only 3 games with 240.
Yeah, he's got a big afro now too, Mac Hollins. He looks like a completely different person. I saw his picture on ESPN Fantasy when I was scrolling through the waiver wire column, and I was like, "Whoa, that's Mac Hollins." Yeah, who would have thought? Coming into the year, I was really, really low from a fantasy football perspective. Every time I talked about fantasy football on my radio show, I went at length saying, "Don't draft Davante Adams, don't draft Hunter Renfrow, and definitely don't draft Darren Waller." Because with all 3 of those targets, one of them will probably get a lot of them, and one of them will probably be really good, but 2 of them will suffer big time. Well, all 3 are suffering big time because who knew Mac Hollins was the number 1 wide receiver here. So yeah, it's pretty crazy to see what's happening with this Raiders offense. What I will say is I think the Raiders will get back on track. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs, but they don't seem like a team to me that's just going to pack it in and stink this year. They've lost all 3 games, I believe, by, I think, less than 5 points.
Their point differential is minus 13.
Oh, man, that's brutal. Yeah, they have really had some hard luck losses. So it'll be interesting to see. I think they take care of business this coming week against Denver. I think that's a classic kitchen sink game for the Raiders, and a classic Broncos might be 2-1, but might be the worst 2-1 team of all time. So
they better
I think
take care of business against Denver because they play Kansas City in Week 5, and they're not winning that game.
Yeah, that's an 0-5 start if you don't beat Denver. So, they better take care of business there.
Josh McDaniels is 5-20 as a head coach since he started 6-0 in Denver in 2019. Wow. Just another Patriot assistant. So only one, you probably know this one. Only one team has started 0-3 and made the playoffs this millennium. Do you know who it was?
Is it the Texans?
Yeah, 2018 Texans. So the odds are against them. I think they're going to be a competitive team. Like you said, minus 13 PD. So they've lost all 3 of their games by an average of 4.3 points. So they've had some bad luck. You would expect that to rebound, but it might be too late in just a loaded AFC West. The other note I had from this game, I don't know what's going on with Caleb Farley. He was a first-round pick a year ago by the Titans. He opened camp as a starter for them. Now he doesn't even play the nickel, and the Titans are getting gashed through the air. So I don't know what's going on with Caleb Farley, but he's a guy I was really high on that seems to be falling by the wayside in Tennessee.
Yeah, I listened to a podcast, and the producer is a Titans fan, so they go to him for like a Titans minute, and he was talking about how like Caleb Farley is like the training camp and the practice reports have been so bad on Caleb Farley that his development has just been so terrible, and a lot of that's probably due to injuries, but that's been a mess of a pick for Tennessee. Tennessee's taken some chances on injury guys at the top of the draft, and they've panned out. Jeffrey Simmons has turned into one of the better D linemen in the NFL. Sometimes it doesn't pan out. So it seems like that's what's going on with Caleb Farley. I will just say with Tennessee, I thought Derrick Henry looked like Derrick Henry. And I thought this kind of looked like the offense they probably were hoping for. Losing A.J. Brown, they probably thought, okay, this is how we'll get by in terms of running the football, play action, all that stuff, spreading the ball around. And that's kind of what they did in this game. Tennessee, I know we're all writing that division off and giving it to Jacksonville right away. I will just say I don't think we've heard the last from Tennessee. I think Tennessee is going to be involved in that race until the end of the year.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Jacksonville, let's get into the Jags. They go to Los Angeles and they smack the Chargers 38-10. Now, the Jags got some turnover luck early with an interception that went through Sony Michel's hands. They had a strip sack of Justin Herbert, and all of a sudden they're up 13-0, and the Chargers could just never get going. The Chargers, injuries continue to mount. They lost Rashawn Slater mid-game to a season-ending biceps injury. They lost Joey Bosa to a groin injury. Injuries continue to mount for the Chargers. Side note, your guy, Devin Lloyd, played great in this game. 7 tackles, 3 pass breakups, and an interception. What did you take away from this game?
Yeah, this is, the end of the Chargers season, and it stinks to say that, but losing your left tackle is one of the best left tackles in the sport. Losing Bosa for who knows how long. Keenan Allen has already been missing time. J.C. Jackson hasn't played yet. This has just been a nightmare season. It's a shame because I think that roster was good enough to really compete with anybody in the NFL, and I think if they were healthy, I think that roster would be special. We never even got to see it. Like, Allen got hurt right away. I mean, Jason Jackson, like I said, hasn't played. It's just Herbert gets hurt in week 2. It's just so unfair in terms of this season going so negatively. If any team in the world has injury luck to complain about, it's the LA Chargers, and people are going to take this and turn it into a Jacksonville is amazing, oh my God thing. And I'm not, me, like I love Doug Peterson. I love Trevor Lawrence. As in on the Jags as almost anybody. I will just say this is kind of one of those games where when the ball gets rolling downhill, it got rolling fast. And Jacksonville got up early, and then the Chargers were chucking and ducking with a hurt offensive line and a hurt quarterback who probably shouldn't have been playing, especially should not have been playing down 28 with 1 minute and 20 seconds left. What are you doing, Brandon Staley?
Dropping back to pass every time.
Protect your franchise. Protect your franchise. Like,
yeah, for the Chargers, this game doesn't mean anything other than their season's over if they can't get some guys healthy. And if they can backdoor as a 7 seed into the playoffs and be generally healthy, I still think they can make some noise, but they've got an uphill battle. They won't do that, making stupid decisions. Like you said, trotting an injured Justin Herbert out there in the fourth quarter, down 28, behind 3 backup offensive linemen. I'm ready to cancel Brandon Staley. I'm done. Staley, he's a joke. Like, he looks good talking in front of the cameras or whatever. You sit there and you get asked after the game about that. And you say, well, he wanted to be out there with his teammates. Every professional athlete ever wants to be out there with their teammates. As a coach, it is your job to be a grown-up in the room and think about long-term. And long-term interests, you have zero chance to win that game. Get Justin Herbert out of there. So I'm done. Like, that would be a fireable offense if I was the Chargers owner. That's absurd. There's zero reason he should have been out there. I would have had serious thoughts about firing Brandon Staley by Monday morning.
If I was the Chargers owner, I'd have serious thoughts about firing the guy who injected Tyrod Taylor and like ruined his career. And then there was a report that the same guy's given an injection to Justin Herbert's ribs. What are we doing, Chargers? What are we doing?
I'm pretty sure Justin Herbert paid that guy off.
Justin Herbert's a good man. Let's not accuse Justin Herbert of hurting Tyrod Taylor, my guy Tyrod. By the way, we'll get to the Giants, but if Tyrod Taylor was the Giants quarterback, they'd be 3-0.
Ooh, spicy. I like it. Don't disagree. For the Jags, I think this game means everything. And they were playing a tremendously banged up team, but their offense looks great. Trevor Lawrence looks like what he was supposed to look like. The defense is flying around. Doug Peterson has the team playing really well, just like we knew he would. We called Peterson to Jacksonville, said he was going to be great there. I have a question for you. 3 weeks into this season, can we safely say that Urban Meyer is the worst NFL head coach of all time?
Oh, we said that we could have said that last year. What I thought you were going to say is 3 weeks into the season, are you ready to admit how wrong you were on Trayvon Walker? Because this guy is a beast. This guy's a beast. I make fun of Tony Khan, the owner of AEW, for being such an analytics darling and being such a nerd. They went with the analytics. They went with the freakish athleticism, and he's a freak. It looks like it's paying off so far. Not that there haven't been other really good players in this draft that could have went number one and would pay off as well. But Trayvon Walker looks as good as anybody right now.
Yeah, he's looked phenomenal. I'm definitely going to end up eating some crow on that one.
Me too.
All right, let's keep it rolling here. The Rams traveled to Arizona. They win 20-12. Rams scored on each of their first 3 drives to get a 13-0 lead, and then their offense just fell off. Fortunately, they were playing the Cardinals, where that kind of thing is okay. You can just stop playing after the first quarter. Matthew Stafford was held without a touchdown pass for the first time as a Rams starter. The Cardinals' offense was just atrocious early. They had 22 yards on their first 4 drives. I don't know. I don't have much confidence in either one of these teams, honestly. I don't. I think the Rams, they've probably got a good shot to make the playoffs because it's the NFC. The Cardinals they're a mess. I don't really have much else to say about this one.
I'll be totally honest. I watched 0.00 seconds of that game for sure. Definitely did not watch that game. So I am willing to move on to the next one here.
All right. The only fun thing off of this one, Aaron Donald did record the 100th sack of his career in this game. So a big milestone.
You know what?
For Donald.
I just lied because I did see that, and it was a flag, and they weren't sure if it was going to count at first, and then they were like, "Wait, is it a flag? Is it a sack?" And then they were like, "Flag on the offense," and everyone was like, "Oh, 100 sacks." So I did see that on Red Zone actually, but yeah, I didn't have a bet on this game, didn't have a thought on this game. The only I watched it based on Red Zone, and I kept being shocked that the Rams weren't pulling away more.
Yeah. All right, 4 games left. Atlanta travels to Seattle, gets their first win of the season, 27-23. The Falcons' offense is just so much fun to watch. Like, it's such a collegey approach with the pistol and the read option, and it's working. It's been fun to watch Mariota in that. They got Kyle Pitts involved. Drake London looks like a star. Cordero Patterson's being used, out of the backfield, out of the slot, just like you would expect a college guy to be used. Mariota's looked good. He had 2 fumbles in this one, but overall he's played well. The Falcons' defense just is not good. They've allowed Jameis Winston, Matthew Stafford, and Geno Smith to complete 72% of their passes this year. This was a game of fireworks early. Atlanta scored on 5 of their first 7 possessions. Seattle scored on 4 of their first 5, but Atlanta emerges with their first win of the year.
Isn't it funny how, if you target Kyle Pitts 8 times,
you win football games.
He's probably going to get like 87 yards. He's probably going to help you out in a lot of ways because he's really good at football. So I will just say, even though I have made fun of Arthur Smith a little bit with the Kyle Pitts stuff because it's incredibly frustrating, I think he's a great coach. I think he's an incredible play caller. I think he does a lot of interesting things. Like you said, it's very college-y. I think what he's doing with Marcus Mariota is absolutely incredible. But, I mean, you said it best. They've got really interesting pieces. Cordero Patterson, 17 carries for 141 yards. He rushed for over 8 yards a carry in this game. That he was once a running back wide receiver combo. He only had 1 target in this game, 1 run reception in this game. He's a full-on running back at this point. Like, he's a starting running back. And then you have Drake London, who's an absolute star, like you mentioned. Kyle Pitts, who is the 3rd best tight end in football, even if he's not being used like he is. So the Falcons are fun to watch, and they're a team that I'm going to want to watch every week. I'm going to want to bet on every week, and they play the Browns this week. I'm already tempted to bet on them again. Like, I'm already tempted to because I think that's going to be a close game, and the Falcons play these close games. So I'm starting to think the Falcons can be, an 8-win team and be frisky all year. And people are going to hear that and think that's crazy. They won 7 last year, and I think this team is markedly better than they were last season when they had a couple lucky wins. And I think they were 32nd in DVOA last year, even being 7-10, which is pretty unbelievable. Their over under was 4.5. They were one of my favorite overs on the season, and I feel great about that. Even though they're only 1-2, they could be 2-1 or 3-0. To be quite honest, if you look at all 3 of those games, they should be 2-1. They should have won week 1, but the Falcons have really impressed me on the offensive side of the ball. Defense, not so much.
Yeah, hopefully the defense comes along because I'm on that over 4.5 wins as well.
I don't think you'll have to worry about that. Like, I really do think they're going to hit 5+ rather easily.
Yeah, I mean, they still get to play Carolina twice, so.
Yeah, you're not going to lose twice to Baker Mayfield playing the way he's playing right now.
Okay, Green Bay at Tampa Bay. Green Bay wins 14-12. Aaron Rodgers started hot. He goes 12 of 13 and capped the first 2 drives with touchdowns. And they would never score again. Aaron Jones had a goal line fumble, took points off the board. Fortunately, their defense bailed them out. For the Bucs, Tom Brady was missing Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Julio Jones. I thought Brady played fine. The wide receivers were just bad. The offensive line's bad. They have no running game. It came down to a 2-point conversion that was broken up by Devondre Campbell. I think there's major concerns from both of these teams. Aaron Rodgers is averaging 228 yards per game this season, which is the worst total of his career. The Bucs defense has looked great, but they haven't played a good offense yet, and their offense has been atrocious. Bucs have only allowed 27 points in 3 games, and they're going to have to continue to carry the load with a banged-up offense that could get good down the stretch if they can get guys back healthy. They're just not the Bucs that we expected to see so far this year.
I actually walked out of this game thinking, like, man, I feel like everything went wrong for the Bucs, and they had a 2-point conversion to tie it up to go to OT. Like, this was the game I watched closest. And when Green Bay goes up 14-3, you kind of think that's over. And Tampa Bay even had like a fumble where they fumbled and Green Bay got it on the 50 up 14-3. They didn't do anything with it. I think they got sacked and punted the ball away. But yeah, I think this was actually a game where I walked out of thinking like Bucs are going to get a couple guys back and be the much better team in this matchup comparatively to Green Bay. Even though Green Bay won the game, I think Green Bay has much bigger problems and much bigger fish to fry than Tampa Bay does. I think Tampa Bay is a better team. And I think Tampa Bay, like I said earlier, they're my number one concern in terms of talking about the Eagles, looking at the landscape of the NFC, because I think once they get Evans will be back this week. I keep saying once they get Evans back, that was a suspension. He'll be back this week. Once they really get Godwin back and maybe a piece or two on the offensive line, that will be when we see Tampa take that next step. But, I mentioned the offensive line, and that's been a huge concern that people have talked about a lot. If you watch this game, I didn't necessarily think they lost because Brady didn't have enough time to throw. I thought they lost because people didn't get open. I mean, there's a reason Russell Gage got 13 targets in this game. It's because he didn't have anything to work with. When Russell Gage is by far your best option, that's a problem. I mean, I think people are kind of shocked at how Brady looks. And I guess I am just a little surprised because I'm still watching the Bucs. They're moving the ball down the field. They're getting good drives going. They just can't finish them off whatsoever. They can't score. To me, that's something that is going to regress positively to the mean at some point, especially when you have better football players playing receiver. But I will just say, if people are comparing what Tom Brady looks like with Russell Gage and Cameron Brate and Cole Beasley to what he looked like when he had Mike Evans, a healthy Chris Godwin, and Rob Gronkowski, and I know we're not supposed to talk about him because he's a crazy person and we don't talk about him as a football player anymore, but Tom Brady's numbers in the games that Antonio Brown played with those other three guys were absurd. And it's kind of the same situation that Jalen Hurts is in right now. When the Bucs had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski and Leonard Fournette, Brady had so many options. Tampa Bay had so many options of what they were able to do. That's just not the case right now, especially with Godwin hurt, especially with Gronk retired, and especially with Evans out for this week temporarily. So while I'm not concerned about Tom Brady, while I'm not concerned about the Bucs, I will just say I think people are overly concerned because the weapons that he's had over the last couple of years have been historic.
Yeah. I think Brady's been fine. There's not much to work with there right now. Yeah. He needs to get on the phone with Gronk, get him out of whatever he's doing, and get him on the sidelines. But
get Gronk and Edelman down there.
There you go. All right, let's roll on to the Sunday night football game. San Francisco at Denver. San Francisco loses 10-11. Watching this game, I had a realization, and that is that not every primetime game is worth the effort or time to watch. This was such a slop fest. 17 combined punts, 2 fumbles, 2 interceptions, a safety. The Broncos' offense is horrendous. They had 10 punts on the night. They had 2 drives that started at midfield and gained 0 yards combined. Russell Wilson took 4 sacks. He only attempted 1 deep pass. The Broncos are averaging 14.3 points per game, and somehow they are 2-1. On the 49ers side, Jimmy G stepping out of the back of the end zone was the best play he made all night because it saved a pick 6. Does that give you an EPA of 5 for that play? You added 5 points by stepping out of the back of the end zone before you threw the pick 6. The Niners offense is bad. It's real bad. And now it has to replace Trent Williams, who left the game with an ankle injury. So the Broncos have a good defense. They're allowing 12 points a game. 49ers have a good defense. Both teams are going to have to ride their defense into the ground and just pray their offense figures something out.
Yeah, I'm not going to be as low on San Fran's long-term offense just because they still have Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle. If Trent Williams can come back and if Trent Williams can be healthy, I don't know the timetable on his injury, but I think he's probably the most important player on their roster. So the fact that he's out is going to make them look, and we saw it instantly. Not that their offense was gangbusters before he got hurt, but we saw once he got hurt that they weren't going to score another point in that game once he got hurt. I'm not as low on Jimmy G, I think, as you are, and I'm not as low on Jimmy G as a lot of people are. But what I will say is the smattering of people out there who were saying, oh, Trey Lance shouldn't be starting, and oh, Jimmy G's the better option, and oh, they should put Jimmy G in when Trey Lance was struggling in week 1 or whatever the case may be. I think you got a taste in week 3 on why the 49ers were trying to move on from Jimmy G, on why the 49ers were trying to make a play for some upside, make a play with a guy who had physical traits where if Jimmy G's not playing well, they're screwed. They can't roll him out. They can't use him in the running game. If Trey Lance isn't playing well, they could have had him rush for 60 or 70 yards and at least help the offense move the ball in some ways. That's not an option with Jimmy G. So this was a healthy dose of reality to the people out there who didn't understand why the 49ers were trying to move on with Trey Lance. So, not that I think that Jimmy G can't take the 49ers to places like they went to the NFC Championship last year with him, and the offense had its moments of being fine. But yeah, it definitely makes you feel a lot worse about San Fran. And Denver won the game, but I think I feel even worse about them. I will just say, as someone who's got Denver under 10.5, it's an absolute nightmare that they're 2-1 right now playing the way they have, because this team stinks.
Yeah. Trent Williams was a high ankle sprain, so that's usually like a 4 to 6 weeks.
Especially for a big boy.
And it's not something that when you come back from, you need an off season to heal. It's not something you come back, like you deal with it. That's the injury Lane Johnson had when he was in and out of games. I can't remember what year it was, 2020, 2019 maybe. So Williams probably missing a month or more, and it's likely he's going to be in and out of games after that. So that's a huge blow to their offense.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's roll on to Monday Night Football. Dallas travels to New York for a showdown with the undefeated Giants, who are undefeated no more after they dropped this one 23-16. I learned my lesson from watching Sunday Night Football, and I did not watch this one. I waited for the condensed version, so I would only have to suffer for 40 minutes instead of 3 hours.
Did you get the full scope of the suckage of Daniel Jones though, watching the condensed version instead of having to sit through the full game?
Yeah, and I mean, it's even better if you can like throw it on 1.5 speed, like I listen to all podcasts. Then you can get through it in like 25 minutes. But
I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can feel how painful it is to watch Daniel Jones, then have to wait for the next play, and then to watch him. Oh,
I mean, I watched Carson Wentz in 2020. The Giants' offense is just a mess. Like, Jones was pressured on 40% of his dropbacks. Evan Neal looked awful in this game. Wide receivers dropping passes. Saquon Barkley on the plus side, maybe. He finally looks to be healthy and in top form. And guess what? It's time for a new contract. So, again, why you don't take a running back in the top 5 or the first round period.
Have fun with that.
Yeah. Dallas, they ran the ball well in this game. They took the pressure off of Cooper Rush. Cooper Rush, by the way, is one of 3 Cowboys quarterbacks to be 3-0 in their first 3 starts. You got a guess as to who the other 2 are?
Romo and Dak, right? It's got to be.
Neither one, actually.
Wow.
Both prominent names.
Lay them on me.
Roger Staubach.
Troy Aikman.
Jason Garrett.
Wow. I went over 3 there.
Yeah. Yeah. To be honest, I barely remember Jason Garrett as a player. I don't remember Roger Staubach, obviously, but
Jason Garrett now calls Notre Dame football as an announcer, and he's just terrible at it.
Does he clap his hands into the mic?
He just says nothing of value at all. He has no sort of insight of that would be helpful to anybody that is listening whatsoever. But yeah, Cooper Rush isn't bad.
Yeah, he's Cooper better Rush than I probably gave him credit for. I didn't think. I thought they had one of the worst backup situations in the league, but Cooper Rush hasn't been bad.
I think they did too. They didn't put Cooper Rush on the active roster to start the year. Someone could have claimed Cooper Rush if they wanted him. They waived him and then brought him back. They were initially only carrying 1 quarterback to start the season. So, I mean, I think it's borderline shocking how good Cooper Rush has been. And I'm starting to be a little bit nervous that the Cowboys are going to be relevant this year because 2-1 without Dak and kind of how things are shaping into form with Parsons looking like Lawrence Taylor, with Zeke and Pollard looking like a legitimate 1-2 kind of punch in the running back slot, with CeeDee Lamb kind of finally looking like the guy we've expected him to look like, even with a big drop in that game. He had a drive pretty much completely devoted to him getting them down the field to score a touchdown. So there's a lot to like with this Dallas team, and it's the big names, it's the stars, like it always is with the Dallas Cowboys. But I'm starting to think that maybe I counted them out after the Dak injury, and I counted them out before the year, and I counted them out because of the Week 1 performance, even before the Dak injury. Maybe a bit too prematurely. I think this Dallas team probably makes the playoffs.
Interesting. I'm not sure that I'm there yet, but we'll see. We'll see.
As a wild card, they're not going to compete with us for the division, but yeah.
I think right now they're being carried by their defense, and defensive play is so much more volatile than offensive play. And so I do think they've got to figure, which obviously they're playing a backup quarterback right now, but the offense has to get better before I would start to be too concerned.
Real quick. I know we're an hour, 20 minutes into a show that I thought we could keep at an hour, but I think Philly wins the East, Green Bay wins the North, Tampa Bay wins the South, and probably the Rams win the West. They probably figure out a way to win the West. The wild cards at that point are as muddy as you'd think. Let's give San Fran one, just because I think that defense is really good. I trust Kyle Shanahan to figure it out. Even without Trent Williams, I think they probably do it. Let's give Minnesota one, since they're 2-1 and they haven't even played that well, and they have the guys to do it. Let's give Minnesota one. That 7th slot, those were my 6 playoff teams to start the year, and that 7th slot I had initially had penciled in for Washington, because I was higher on Washington than consensus. I don't think it's going to be Washington. So at this point, we're talking about Dallas, maybe Detroit. Detroit's probably in the conversation at this point. I don't think any of Carolina, Atlanta, or New Orleans will be in the conversation. Or it kind of comes down to if you think Arizona is a disaster or not. I think the 7th slot is not going to be a good team. It's going to be a Dallas or a Detroit or an Arizona.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's why they shouldn't have expanded the playoffs to begin with.
Yeah, I kind of like it just because it gives the 1 seed such an advantage. I like the idea of one team getting a bye, because I think that gives such an advantage to that top team that I think was missing before. So I do like it in terms of that. But yeah, the 7th seed is usually going to be bad. So it's usually going to not matter. But right now, picking out of those 3 teams and going through the things we just did, Dallas would be my pick to make the playoffs.
Are you a Manning cast guy when you watch the games?
It's funny. I always forget about the Manning cast until the 2nd or 3rd quarter when I see something on Twitter, and then I'm like, oh man, I have to go turn into it, and it's always good. Yeah. The one thing I'll say, and I have a very strong take about the Manning cast. Just give me the Mannings. I don't need Tracy Morgan. I don't need Shannon Sharp. I don't need the guests. Just give me the Mannings, busting each other's balls, calling out coverages, making fun of each other, bringing up old replays of them from their games, either getting jacked up or running for touchdowns or throwing bad interceptions. Like, give me all that content. I don't need the interviews. Like, I'm not watching for Peyton and Eli's interview skills.
Yeah, I always forget about it, and then I see stuff on Twitter later, and I'm like, oh, I got to remember to watch that next week. But I saw this one on Twitter, and I thought it was hilarious. But Eli was saying that he said, I watched warm-ups, and he was hitting from 60. And Peyton said, you didn't watch warm-ups. Someone just told you that in your ear. You've never watched kicking warm-ups in your entire life. And that had me going pretty good. So I got to remember to watch the Manning cast next week.
Eli was being a full-on Giants homer in this game, so it turned me off a little bit. But the one interesting thing, Peyton Manning, 2 weeks ago when the Broncos, was this the Broncos? No, it was Broncos Seahawks. It was week 1. Peyton Manning was like full-on Broncos cheerleader. And it's funny because, like, I think of Peyton Manning in my head as a Colt, and I always will. He's just a Colt in my head. So it was funny to see him. I think he probably identifies more as a Bronco than a Colt at this point, because the Colts kind of kicked him to the side. He won the Super Bowl with Denver. I think he probably considers himself a Bronco. Just a weird random.
You think there's bad blood with him and the Colts?
I'm sure no. Like, I'm sure there's not bad blood, but I'm sure, like, in his heart of hearts, he probably appreciates Denver more. Yeah. I think he's probably even like become more of a Denver guy than an Indy guy, which is a crazy thing in my head.
I always felt like Indy did right by him, that he was coming off the injury. They had the number 1 pick.
And they let him go pick his team.
Yeah, he was obviously getting near the end and they let him go. So, but yeah, especially when you go win a Super Bowl with Denver at the end of your career. I could see your split loyalties there.
Yeah, I'm a huge Peyton guy. Peyton's one of the people who got me into football for sure. Watching Peyton Manning, he was I think he's top 3, top 5 quarterback of all time.
I loved his SNL sketches. The one where he was the mentor, one of my favorite of all time. Go look it up if you haven't seen it.
And the shame of it is, Eli is just as good as Peyton at these broadcasting things, if not better. And it sucks because I used to hate Eli so much. I think he's one of the more overrated athletes in any sport of all time, who just had a couple insane Joe Flacco runs. And instead of, I don't want to do a whole Eli Manning conversation, but this is actually a compliment for Eli Manning. I think he's fantastic. I think he's really funny. I think he might be just as funny as Peyton, which is funny because Peyton was regarded as like the funniest athlete of all time for years and years and years. But Eli's SNL was maybe just as good as Peyton was when they did the thing about like
the Big Brother
beating up Big Brothers. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah.
It was great.
All right. Well, that was a 5-minute journey I didn't expect to take, but that was well worth it. So go check out the Manning Cast if you haven't. Somebody ping me on Twitter this weekend and remind me to watch it instead, because I'm going to forget again. I do every week. So, Mark, before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts for us this week?
Final thoughts. I guess my final thoughts, well, I'll turn it to you for a conversation a little bit. I know Shane probably doesn't want to talk about it, but my question to Shane, as an Oklahoma graduate, why does Kansas State just own Oklahoma? What is this?
So, well, first of all, I'm actually not an Oklahoma graduate.
I thought you were.
I went to a smaller school here in Oklahoma, but I've been a lifelong OU fan. I graduated from OBU, but I homer for OU all the time. I am firmly convinced that I am firmly convinced that OU is going to the SEC to get away from Kansas State. I have a buddy that I graduated with that we go to an OU game every year together. Shout out Joe. He'll be listening to this tomorrow probably. We have a rule now that we will never go to an OU State game again because we've gone to so many that they've lost. And we don't want our one game a year to be a loss. I was going camping with my family this weekend, so I didn't get to watch the game. And originally, the camping trip was going to be the weekend of OU Texas, and we were going with other people. It got rescheduled, and she was like, "It's Kansas State now. Is that better?" I was like, "Oh yeah, that's perfect. They're going to lose to Kansas State anyways. I'd rather not watch that." I don't know. I don't know what it is, but they have had their number for years. I think the stat is like OU has lost like 11 home games in like the last 10 years or something, and 4 of them are Kansas State. It's just ridiculous.
I thought that it might change with Lincoln Riley gone and with Venables in. I guess my question for you is, where are you at on Venables right now?
Well, let me ask you a question, because this is going to be my final thought. Let me give you a situation here. You put on the defensive headset for me, okay?
Okay.
2 minutes left. You're down 7 points. It's a 3rd and 16 at the 41-yard line. What is your play call if the opponent's quarterback has run for 93 yards on the day?
Maybe put a QB spy there. Yeah.
Maybe not call a cover 1 blitz with no spy and let the guy run 55 yards. Like, it's just an asinine play call. I mean, either if you want to play man because you got better athletes, fine, drop a spy, don't rush 5 and force this guy out of the pocket, contain rush him, whatever. You play the Jim Schwartz sticks defense, drop 8 guys into cut. I don't care. Don't do that. It was just, I'm not ready to say that, Brent Venables isn't the guy or whatever. I told people early on that we're just lauding the defense. It's like, let's wait till they play somebody. Like, it's looked good. They've played nobody. It's hard to evaluate on that. College defenses are more complicated than NFL defenses, which doesn't make any sense, but they are. Because you try to compensate for having lesser athletes with installing complex schemes, and you get these guys for 4 years where there's not the roster turnover there is in the NFL. So, he's been there for he's been there more than a few weeks, but a few weeks of games.
Months, yeah.
He doesn't have his guys in yet. It takes time to teach that system. So I don't think you can make a judgment in that off of year one, but that was definitely a frustrating play call. To see you come out with that, like just something that when they came out with 5 guys across, like this has got to be a sim pressure. There's no way you're blitzing here. and then they blitzed. And like as soon as I saw all 5 guys go, I just knew. Like I knew what was going to happen.
And then this is a safe space, so you know we can let it out. Caleb Williams was really good, Shane. Caleb Williams is so good, Shane. He's so good. I cannot wait until you have to watch him for the NFL draft in 2 years when he's going to be the number 1 pick. I'm in love with Caleb Williams as an NFL prospect. He's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the arm. Like
it'll just be next year, won't it?
Yeah, I meant in 2 drafts technically.
Okay,
yeah. Because this draft and it's not this draft coming up; it'll be the next draft. But yeah, that Lincoln Riley offense they didn't have their best game this week because they played Oregon State, who has a really good defense, but they escaped a really tough game. USC is a national playoff contender, so
yeah, my dream of an OU USC playoff game took a big hit this weekend. So
yeah, that's true.
All right. Well, I think that is going to about do it as Mark is deciding to use his final thoughts to rub salt in my wounds. I haven't been talking about Notre Dame on
Notre Dame stinks. Yeah. You want me to talk about Notre Dame? I might be done with Marcus Freeman already. You're saying year 1 might be too early to make a call on Venables. Marcus Freeman might not be the guy. I'll give him a couple of years because he's been recruiting at such an insane level, like levels to which Notre Dame has never recruited in the modern era. But man, in terms of the X's and O's, in terms of the scheming it up, and even Tommy Rees, former quarterback for Notre Dame, who's the OC, who's actually calling plays now, that's been rough. So yeah, the coaching staff for Notre Dame, serious concerns. I barely watched the North Carolina game this week. I was at the Phillies game. Like, yeah, I'm so checked out. So I had to rub some salt in your wounds because my wounds are like scars at this point after those 2 losses, including one to Marshall.
Ugh. It's always a fun time when you lose to Marshall.
Yeah.
This is why we talk about the Eagles. It's much more.
Yeah.
Much more fun, I guess we could say. So anyways, thank you for everyone that joined us for episode number 73 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Turn on notifications. Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps us out. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. You can follow Mark at MarkHenryJr_. So from me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.